Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Servant Aftershow being presented by the Hollywood Critics Association. My name is Heather Wixson, and this week I'm going to be joined, as always, by my co-host, Rick Hong, and we are also welcoming back Kit Bowen after last week. Hello, Kit.
Hey, how are you guys?
Great. It's really fun. Like, it's so strange to have like a 30-minute TV show that just feels like I could talk about it for hours. So I'm really glad that we get to do this because I don't have anybody else to talk to about this show. So it's like nice to have be able to dive in it with you guys.
Yeah, for sure. It is. There's a lot to unpack all the time.
All the time.
Yeah, because like they're only just dropping little morsels, so you're just kind of like,
Yeah, this show has what we would call luggage because there is a lot to unpack. That is my dad joke for the episode. Rick, you were checking out some of the comments from last week on our episode, correct?
Oh, I just wanted to give out a big shout out to Paul and Heather and Jerry for chiming in and kind of giving their thoughts and ideas about last week's episode. And the funnier one too is like Heather Jones. I actually like that you tried the dandelion soup. So I'm hoping this week's maybe in the comments you actually say, should we eat it? Should we not eat it? Because as Heather Wixson says, this show is about not only drinking on my end, but eating food. And this was an interesting episode when it came to food and cooking for sure.
Oh, God. Indeed.
Definitely. Sorry, my dogs are literally just freaking out right now. So that's why I went to mute really quick because I can't get her to stop. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry. This is the joys of live recording. And I apologize. Winnie, please. Oh my gosh. Anyway, yes, she's looking at me like, what did I do wrong? Sorry. Never name your dog after a Bette Midler character because you get what you sow. She's a handful. So this week we're going to be talking about the episode Ring, which I don't know about you guys, but this was probably by far one of the most anxiety-inducing episodes I think we've had.
Whew. Totally.
Like, I feel like you need to like go and like have a drink, take a walk, smoke whatever. Like, I don't know, but this is one of those episodes where I was like, somebody really put in the work because I was exhausted by the time it was done.
Yeah.
It's funny because like this episode is one of those things where, whatever goes on in this show, like last week's episode with like the hair and the DNA thing. Okay. That's like one thing, but this week's episode with, what's going on in the kitchen, and everything. I'm like, I think everybody relates like that being a nightmare or, it's like one of those top things of like, I hope that never, ever, ever happens to me.
Yeah, that was crazy. Well, first of all, I've worked with, in the sort of the catering, biz at various points in my life. And, it can get very chaotic in the kitchen. And, when you're trying to get everything together, I could see why Sean was so stressed out, but the girlfriend, I'm blanking on her name, the Toby's
Sylvia?
Sylvia or Celine?
I think it was Sylvia.
Sylvia.
Okay.
Yeah. Was she a piece of work or what? But I think really what I took away from this episode just for an overall view was that when Leanne wants something to happen, she makes it happen.
Yeah, there's definitely
something going on. Yeah,
there's definitely an interesting power shift happening as we're getting further into this season, and it's interesting because as we start the episode, we have this really fun little scene with Dorothy and Leanne where they're doing some dance stuff together in the attic. Which their attic again, it's like every time you see it, it looks different to me because we were talking about sort of how this house is kind of like The Shining. So now they have this room where they have a little dance studio and like a little sitting area. And I'm like, where was this when Leanne was locked up in the attic before?
Is that the same attic? I guess it must be.
I guess so. It's like infinite space inside this house. But I like the fact that Dorothy talks about the artist who I believe her name was Vivian Dale. And she talks about how Vivian turned her pain into power. And I think that was so apropos of everything we saw in this episode because Leanne was definitely turning some of her own issues into some very big power plays, whether people realized it or not. And there's parts of me that feel, I'm like, okay, girl, get it. But then also I'm kind of a little bummed because it also ends up sort of hurting Dorothy in the long run, which maybe she has it coming because of things that have happened before. But I think definitely this was a really interesting turning point for Leanne's character.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think she's well, that first season, that first scene, she's like, her telling her little story about how her mother basically abused her, by making her be in these pageants and whatnot. And you can tell that really affects Dorothy, and they're having that moment, and then all of a sudden, Dorothy's taken out of it again. She's highly easily distracted, and that just bugs Leanne to no end, right? But I love the idea that Leanne basically pushes Dorothy around in a sense. She's very, forthcoming and very straightforward, and saying you should stay home, blah blah blah. But then when she's with Sean, she's like a servant. She's like, yes sir, I'll help you. Yeah, absolutely, I'll do that right away. And it's this weird thing she has with Dorothy that's just kind of, and that really kind of came out in this episode, I thought.
When we got to the opening was interesting because I was watching it, and we've been talking about how this season in the house, it seems that like Leanne rules the roost. But in that moment, it was kind of like I don't know, maybe some metaphors. I'm not even sure if I'm using the right word, but like a little bit of like nakedness, in the sense that you put these like clothes on Leanne that you don't normally see her wear, and she's talking about it. Right. So like her defenses are a little down and this and that. And then like in that moment, I actually see like a very motherly Dorothy to Leanne. By the end, or like through the middle and through the end, and like kind of like that we've seen through the nature of the season, like that hasn't been the case. But just at least for this one scene in particular, second part, kind of felt like, like the dynamic played off here in this scene is like almost like a mother-daughter scene versus like an employer-employee, or Leanne being the person of power in just like that one scene.
Yeah.
And she kind of gets like her big girl voice on, which is like what I say, because I'm somebody who I always describe myself as painfully Midwestern, which means I'm super polite and I bend over backwards for everybody. But every once in a while, I get my big girl voice on, and that's when you're in trouble. And it's interesting because you see it, in a few different ways. Because like there's the one scene when Dorothy's getting dressed and Leanne's doing her buttons,
right? And
she like yanks her. And you could see the look on Dorothy's face, like, oh, this is a different dynamic than I'm used to. But I like that you pointed out how when she's in sort of the workout clothes, she's almost trying to hide. She's kind of backpedaling a little bit. But as soon as she goes and changes, suddenly she's back to being normal, in control Leanne. Again, whether anybody realizes it or not. And I think that's a really interesting little touch. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because I definitely sort of picked up on that, where, she's in those clothes. The security guy's leering at her.
Right.
She's getting sassed at by Sylvia, the worst girlfriend in the world. And she's, Dorothy's kind of talking down to her in a way, which usually doesn't happen much. But once Leanne's back in her, I think in her uniform, so to speak, like, okay, she's like, I'm going to fix this. We're going to take care of this. And I think a lot of this also comes from, because of Leanne's broken relationship with her mom, which has never been implicitly spelled or explicitly spelled out for us. But we've gotten little hints of it in terms of, the way that her mom would treat her during pageants, in some of the stories that she shared in the first two seasons, where I think what really is happening here is I think Leanne is trying to mold Dorothy into the mother that she always wanted in her own life, but she wants it for Jericho. And when Dorothy isn't living up to those expectations, Leanne's like, no, you're going to do this. And I have to say, the scene when Dorothy's out there and she's, interviewing the street artist, and then she starts leaking breast milk. Like, I felt for her on so many levels, because I've never experienced that, but like, you just know, like when you're sort of in that public space and everybody can just sort of see you have one of these moments, like, it's awful. And the look on her face when she came home, I mean, seriously, how we are not throwing every accolade at Lauren Ambrose, I do not know, because she was phenomenal this episode.
Yeah, she was. Actually, that has happened to me. Not necessarily on public television, but
oh my goodness.
But at work, and I all of a sudden my coworker kind of goes, Kit, and I'm like, oh God It's just like,
But so that was interesting because like when I was watching the episode, I was actually thinking farther, not necessarily about the story of Servant and everything else too, but I was actually thinking farther. I was just like, wow, she would actually, sure, there would be the trolls, I guess, because like anytime you're on a camera or whatever, like there's always a troll like on Instagram or YouTube or here. We don't have any trolls here, which is awesome. Thank you. But I was thinking that like she'd probably be a hero though to a lot of women too, where they were chiming in and saying like that happens, like that is just so like there's no need to be grossed out by this or like whatever. But it's horrific for Dorothy because like this is her comeback thing. Like yes, this is who I was before I had the baby, and I've been sitting around, and now I've got this like new scoop, and I'm bringing my persona back, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's I guess it's like almost like getting on stage, like walking on stage, and you're cool, and then boom, you trip.
Yeah, but do you think Leanne was making that happen though?
Oh, I definitely think she was.
Okay.
I think especially because we had the scene earlier when Dorothy was trying to feed Jericho.
Yeah.
And Dorothy kept and Leanne kept trying to push Dorothy like, no, you just have to get on his schedule more, which is her very, subtle way of saying you need to be home more for your son. But yeah, I think because of the nature of Dorothy's work, the fact that she sort of has this younger kind of rival in Isabel, I think it is kind of a deal breaker for her. I think for people like sort of in our realm, like it maybe wouldn't be as bad, but I think, when you're working like a news affiliate, like, television type of things, like,
because she's in Philadelphia, so like that's like a big, that's probably like a top 10 news market.
Yeah,
and who knows what, and like during the day, so like she's probably getting like the good human interest story for like she's probably getting like the 5, like doing whatever probably for like the 5 o'clock news. I want to say if it was still sunlight out.
Yeah, so it's unfortunate. I do agree though. I think that especially this day and age, like I think there are a lot of women that probably would relate to what happened to Dorothy there, but I think also probably part of it was that she broke. Like instead of just kind of rolling with it, she just broke and like walked off. And I think she might have thrown an oh shit in there too. I can't remember exactly, but
before she starts to leak though, she gets that blank stare again, which is what we've seen her do before when she's, either realizing something that she doesn't want to, or, she gets that catatonic look on her face.
Or
so something was happening.
Pulling the strings a little bit.
Yeah, something was happening in her brain that Leanne was doing. And I'm not entirely sure if Leanne knows exactly what she's doing yet. I don't know if she knows the power that she can wield, because of course then she turns around and does the same thing with the horrible girlfriend, I'm sure that Leanne made that happen too, I think. Don't you?
Yeah, let's be honest. Sylvia got what she deserved.
Oh my God.
I love the character of Toby so much, and you could tell because like I think it was episode 1 when Leanne calls him to come over.
Yeah,
and she's
drunk dials him. Yep,
she does.
Yeah, yep. Which is like the most human thing we've seen Leanne do. Because I'm like, yeah, I get it. We've all been there at some point in our lives, and so you could tell that she still has a lot of affection for Toby, and seeing him being mistreated the way that he gets like mistreated, like. I get getting yelled at work. I've worked in high stress environments where I've been yelled at work and I can let it roll off my back. It's never been to that level because I tell you, if I was Toby in that situation, I don't care how polite or nice I was, somebody was going to be getting some hands because that was it was too much. And, even Sean was a little too aggressive, I think too. Yeah. And I get he was stressed out.
Well, but I'm also wondering though, when it comes to Sean, like, is that his persona? Like kitchens are crazy. Chefs are crazy. They get to that stage of like yelling at everything and like wanting perfection and like the timing, it's like, I was thinking about my friend who, when she's hosting Thanksgiving, she has everything set, but then she still's like, the one thing that I kind of still don't get, like I don't have quite is the timing to get all the food to be warm at the same time that I'm dishing everything out. So like she'll put everything on a plate and then like people will kind of reheat in the microwave oven. But a chef can't do that. A chef needs everything. And so I was almost wondering like, because we've had hints of like Sean being like on that television show and like whatever. And I'm like, maybe he's truly a Gordon Ramsay, as a chef, but we see him at home. So we don't see that side of him yet. And like now it's like opening up and saying like, this is the chef side of how Sean behaves and is. And maybe this is why like he's like this popular guy, or like why they put him on TV, to kind of see this crazy, brutal personality that he has.
Yeah, I watch enough Hell's Kitchen to know, like, where I'm just like, oh, he's going full Gordon on him. But yeah, I'm curious to see if that ends up becoming something that sort of like shows up later in the season, because again, you know, with Leanne brings normalcy, you know, Sean and Dorothy are supposed to be able to kind of get back to their professional lives because now they have this nanny. You know, is Sean gonna go forward and get some more success? And is Leanne going to pull that back from him because she wants them all to be at home? And it's like, I don't understand necessarily what I think her end game is a little idealistic, where it's like, well, if Dorothy doesn't work and Sean is at home, like no one's going to be able to like pay for any, like you realize how like the economy works. Right. So it's interesting. Like I'm curious to see if that's going to sort of parlay into things, but that whole sequence, the way it was shot, with the camera swirling around and everybody moving. I totally meant to write down the name of the cinematographer for it, and I didn't get a chance. But that whole sequence was like art. And that scene of Sylvia getting her figure caught, wow. It's probably, it's funny because we've seen worse things happen on this show, but I think the shock of it was probably resonated with me the most out of everything we've seen, where I was like, oh my God, like this girl's hand is like, and she's a chef. So that's it. Like, she's like, that's going to be a huge thing for her. Like, not only has Leanne, you know, ruined this, you know, the immediate, you know, future of this girl, but like her life. Yep. Like, I don't know how you train, you know, I don't know how you do it as a chef when you're dealing with that kind of stuff. I'm sure there's ways, but she's got a long road back. So that's what she gets, Sylvia.
And then the finger flying into the garbage disposal. You're like, oh no.
And that's what I'm saying is like everybody's like nightmare of scenarios. It's like we see it in movies like all the time. You know, the person puts like you hear the and then the person kind of puts their hand down and you think the thing's off, and then the hand kind of goes in, or the person's trying to dig their hand in the thing whether it can fit or not. And in this scenario, it's like it's all there. It's like, oh no. And
it's like the reverse of that almost, because the finger's in there, and then it's like, and then Toby's face when the blood hits him, I was like,
that was more shocking to me than the finger thing. I don't know, the finger thing was shocking, but then to see his, you know, see the blood splatter on his face, and he realized what had happened, and then he picks the ring up out of it. Oh God.
I don't know how your relationships is good after that. I think you're done after that. So.
Yeah, but she was also kind of, you know, it almost kind of felt like, you know, she's using him a bit too. It's like, hey,
totally.
Get me, you know, get me in there. Let me go work with this guy and everything too. So it's like it's almost to the stage of where he's like, Toby's like, he doesn't need her. You're like, oh, that sucks. Oh well, you know, I'll find a girl that has 10 fingers.
Ouch. Too soon, Rick. Too soon.
Wow.
I don't need Holly Hunter from The Piano. Oh, big spoiler. Sorry. Okay.
Can you spoil like a 30-year-old movie or something, or however long ago it's been now? It was such a. I like the moody stuff that Servant does, and I like all these little breadcrumbs. But sometimes when things get a little nasty, is like when I'm like, okay. Yeah. Like I like when they sort of throw us some curveballs, and that was again really fun. And I just kind of like Sean just drinking afterwards, or he's just sitting there like, no, I didn't watch Dorothy on the news because I literally had to deal with this girl losing her finger. And it also like, does this girl sue Sean?
Yeah, right.
Oh yeah, I was thinking about that. I was like, what's the insurance on when you get into a situation where someone just lost their finger and everything?
We'll see how that shakes out.
Yeah, like she didn't sign a waiver, but at the same time, I mean, like she volunteered herself. So is it, you know, are they liable or are they not liable?
Right. Yeah. Right.
But I will never make saltwater taffy, that's for sure.
Well, not with a big giant hook. Well, I know that's how you're supposed to, but I'm not going to just have a giant hook in my house. That's not going to happen. No, but the thing about Leanne that just, like you were saying earlier, like, you know, does this mean that she wants them all to be together all the time? Or is she going to allow Sean to go ahead and flourish, but make Dorothy stay at home? Because, you know, she says, don't worry about Sean. When I'm around, nothing bad will ever happen to him.
Right.
So,
That was a big thing that she
Yeah.
said because they're baby proofing that house. And
Yes.
she's pretty much saying, doesn't matter anything that this kid can drink the poison out of the cleaning solution. He can fall through the
Right.
railings or like whatever. But as
Right.
long as I'm here, this kid is safe.
And that's the other thing I found, yeah, of course, harking back to what I said last week, which is, the baby, like, what's happening? The baby actually died. And the fact that they're baby proofing the house so the baby doesn't die, I thought that was a little twist there of, because they're like looking, they're going, we have to make sure that the baby's safe. And Leanne's standing there going, well, you left the baby in the car and it died in the heat. So, I just thought that was kind of an interesting way. Obviously they're doing what parents always do, but the fact that the baby actually already had died, from neglect or from, mismanagement or whatever the heck it is that happens to Dorothy. So yeah.
Mismanagement's kind of probably the nice way to say it.
Right.
Yeah.
But I thought it was interesting too, because when they came in and met with the safety guy the first time, and he's talking about putting all these latches and stuff in the kitchen, and Sean is just like, you want me to like mess around with knobs and stuff? And it's like, at that point, it was an interesting thing because everything about the show so far has been about Jericho.
Right.
And that's really the first time we saw him put his work ahead of his kid.
Right.
And I'm curious again if that's going to be something that like is going to get thrown back in his face, because if you have little tiny babies running around your house, of course you're going to put baby-proof latches in your kitchen. You don't need them getting into all that kind of stuff. But Sean's immediate concern was, well, that's going to slow me down as a chef. And I'm like, by what? Like 2 seconds every time you have to like flip a little switch or something? So I thought that was a funny little touch. And that guy is gross. Like,
it was interesting because like I just thought like, okay, here comes this guy, and sure, like he's like saying we need to put the plastic up by the banisters, we need this and that. But it's like I could just automatically too, because that guy is so creepy, and just because contractors and people are the way that they are, comes in and just starts saying like, oh yeah, you need this, cha-ching, 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 and I'm like, I sat there and I thought about it. It's like, but is some of that stuff like just unnecessary? Like he's talking about some legit stuff, but I'm wondering if some of it's just unnecessary. And I could just think, like, God, it's just like, that's like the people that's why we hate sometimes like have to hiring people to come in and do things, because we don't know, do we really need it? Are we getting ripped off? Are we not getting ripped off? Even though Dorothy kind of explained to Leanne that this guy's been around for a while, which I guess gave him kind of the open door to start kind of hitting on her, which is also gross.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Especially when he finds out she's 18, like, and he's like, oh no, don't worry, I got a place we can go where you can go with and it's okay. And I'm like, no, that's wrong. That's not right.
Yeah, that was really creepy, and I was like, oh God, one other thing for Leanne to, flip out about or get all, anxiety ridden about, and again, like I said, every single person that enters that house or is in part somehow, that she doesn't know, you kind of think, oh, are they part of the cult? I mean, it's always that sort of age-old thing hanging over that whole family is, when are these cult people going to come and do whatever the horrible things that they're going to do, which leads me to the end of this episode. I loved that, actually. You were talking about the cinematography as well. That was such a beautifully, choreographed moment with her dancing and the music. And again, it's this power she has. Now I'm not thinking that maybe those homeless kids are necessarily out together. They might be flocking towards her. I mean, what do you guys think?
That's what I'm thinking, because we saw one of them come up to her in the street and he wanted to talk to her about something. Yeah. And I'm wondering, because we saw in a previous episode where he talked about like one of his illnesses and how he couldn't afford his medication anymore. So I'm wondering if like these kids somehow recognize like Leanne's special abilities and maybe that she can help them in a way. So yeah,
I mean, is she kind of like the Pied Piper
Messiah type? Yeah. That's what I'm getting now. That's what the feeling I'm getting is that, she is something special, because clearly the cult had, whatever she was, they were worried about her too, or wary of her as well. And now maybe we know why, is that she is like a Pied Piper type. Yeah. But I thought that was beautifully done, though. That was really a nice way to end that episode.
And I really liked the fact too that she had the ring. and used it when she was dancing, which one again sort of shows like her power over that whole scenario with Sylvia, but then also too, I think in a way, like it showed like, she wanted to be the one that Toby gave a ring to.
Yeah.
I think there's like a little bit of yearning there. And so I really liked that whole sequence because again, I think in a weird way, it actually humanizes Liam, because we've all sort of been in that position where maybe we've had feelings towards somebody that they didn't see it or they liked it, but they were with the wrong person or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that we're getting to know the regular sort of Leanne, because she's an 18-year-old girl. Like, you know what I mean? Like, sure, she could do all these things, I guess, like bring babies back to life and sever fingers and things like that. But like, she's still a human being who has like all these different desires and things like that. And one thing I wanted to mention too, that I went back and looked, and one of my favorite details, and I'm trying, by the end of this season, I want to see if it all adds up to something. But one of my favorite details is how in Leanne's room, every time we go in there, her mannequin is wearing something different.
Oh, I
And I
didn't notice that.
Huh.
Yeah. And so now it's like, I'm trying to like take notes. Like I have a whole, like in my, cause I'm back in school. So I have like my school notebooks. I have a section for servants. So every like episode, I'm like writing down like what we see. I'm like, this has got to be leading to something. Cause it's again, breadcrumbs everywhere. So,
Yeah. Well, they do tend to focus on that mannequin. They do. There's always some kind of a shot that you go in on it, and you see the mannequin. And again, this is also, as we were talking about, it's kind of her how she perceives herself, So when she's wearing the workout clothes and she gets the attention from that, the gross attention from the construction guy, then she says, "Oh, is it because I'm, is that you think I look like a whore? Is that why you're doing this to me right now?" So that in her head, that's how she thought she was being portrayed. So, and I think the mannequin is going to have something to do with that, with her image and her, how she perceives herself.
Yeah. I'm guessing maybe it's also probably like a maternal figure. Like I think it's like in her mind sort of represents her mom in a way.
Yeah.
But I think what's interesting is we talked about this, but like how when Leanne was wearing the workout clothes, she was very awkward and unsure of herself. But the minute when the dance sequence at the end, she's in her normal clothes and she's able to just go into like this whole routine.
Yeah.
Which again, I think sort of shows when when she feels like she's in control and that she's sort of hidden away from the world, that's when she's the most, I don't want to say powerful, but maybe sort of inner power.
Yeah.
And she feels the most confident. So yeah,
maybe like a celebration too, like ha ha ha, I just with the girlfriend, like damaging the girlfriend, hence the ring too, which is kind of maybe just a celebratory, like on her own dance of like, I just got away with something, or ha, I just showed you.
Right.
Yeah. And probably tied a little bit to what happened with Dorothy as well, where she's starting to get Dorothy, she's kind control. Of hurting her career, so she's going to be home more, so she's won that little battle. She basically obliterated Toby's relationship this episode, so Leanne ends up sort of being the winner of these little little mishaps this week.
And she's somehow getting minions. We'll see, how that all ends up happening, but who these kids are, and
so is the quiet ones you have to watch out for.
Well, it's also interesting too. So like, did we miss Julian? I mean, was there enough story there, to like where, having that absent series regular, Julian not be in this specific episode, did we feel like there was a void there, or is this like, hey, the story was really good overall, just like with just a dynamic of, having like the extra people come in, like the handyman, and having Toby return with, Sylvie, it's like to fill the void of like no Julian there, no paranoia there about who Leanne is.
Yeah.
Well, I think Julian's still, I was just going to say, I still think Julian represents kind of us. He represents the reality of the situation, and no matter what he ends up doing. So for him to come at the end and say, "Hey, did you see what happened to Dorothy?" And everybody else is like, "No," Sean's like, hell no, I haven't been paying attention to any of that. And he's like bringing it back to the idea that his sister is not well, so I feel like he's kind of that that kind of a character. Whenever he's around, there's some sort of, reckoning of reality to be shown. So
yeah. Well, I also think too, it's just a nice little note in terms of their relationship, that like everybody else on this day in particular had so many different things going on that they were not watching Dorothy on the news, but he was,
right.
And he didn't DVR it. He watched it live. You know what I mean? So I think that there's, again, I think that just shows like, sometimes like when you look at these people with like their privilege and everything like that, you sort of look at them on the surface and think that there's no real emotional connections and things like that, because that's not how people are. But I think deep down there really is this bond between them.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And the fact that he would immediately rush over, like he didn't try to call Sean, he just immediately went there.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a testament to, Julian's character and the relationship that he shares with Dorothy. But
yeah, and that he does care about her. He really does, but he wants her to be well and understand what's going on rather than play the game,
I'm just curious, like, what happens if, like, okay, so Jericho keeps living, but then Dorothy eventually snaps and has this realization that her baby then had died. Like, what do you do with that? Like,
that's the thing that's going to end up. Yeah. Also, did you guys notice the fact that I guess the baby looks bigger than he's supposed to be?
Yeah.
Oh, they talked about that, right?
Yeah.
It's just like he's 9 months, but the person, like Sylvie thought that he was a lot older,
like 18 months. Is that because would he have? No, he would have just been 9 months then, I guess, if he had lived. Right? Is that the case?
Yeah. So it's strange because then it sort of pokes some holes in our theory of like her being able to bring him back, like
right?
So it's like it's a quandary.
What's gonna happen?
That's a good morsel that's in there. That's a good morsel for us to kind of watch the next couple episodes to see if there's some revelation there or if that plays out into the final season.
Yeah.
But by the end of this season, it's like the kid's gonna be like in preschool. He's gonna look like he's 5 or something, and they're gonna be like,
right, exactly, right. But that movie was called Old. We already saw that movie.
That's true. We did see that.
Oh my gosh.
We did see that. Yes.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't put it past Knight because he knows.
Yeah, he does. He knows. He knows about all of that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I'm trying to even think of like any sort of other theories we could throw at this, but I feel like
the guy that commented, Paul, I think from last week said, that was a big plot hole that he could have just used. Julian just could have used his hair to see if the DNA matched because they're related. So I thought that was kind of interesting. We didn't even think about that, but yeah, he could have, I suppose.
But it adds to the effect of the story, right? Like it's the kind of
drama,
him running around being Julian.
Well, maybe it's not like to be honest, like I don't know much about DNA tests, so maybe Julian just wasn't aware. But I get it. It's one of those like I probably, in retrospect now, I've been like, yeah, that probably would have been the best thing to do in this instance. So
yeah, but I feel like these few episodes they've been more subdued, and I feel like we're building up to something like I've been really good. I'm actually just watching the episodes as I go along, although I may have to jump ahead a little bit here. I'm starting to get very intrigued to see what happens, but I feel like you were saying the next episode, things really get crazy. So we'll see.
And at that stage now we're at the midway point. So it's kind of like the peak is slowly coming. And so like now it's, hey, go full blast. I mean, again, this show isn't the typical normal, way that they present the story either. But I'm wondering, also knowing that they've got another, hopefully, I think 10 episodes at least to like really tell the story if maybe like it's still building and we'll still be left with kind of not like an immediate drop.
Yeah. Lots of twists and turns for sure. But yeah, episode 5 is kind of like my favorite that we've seen, but I haven't watched past that yet because I was kind of waiting. So I'll probably binge those after we do our episode 5 recap, and then I'll go through and start watching them and then rewatch them for the shows. But it's just nice because it's one of those things like sometimes when you have to rewatch stuff for work, it kind of feels like a chore. But this doesn't at all because one, the episodes go so quick, and really two, there's so much to catch the first time you watch it. You kind of do have to watch it a second time.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like even stuff you guys brought up, I'm like, ooh, I'm gonna have to go back and watch it again just to see the mannequin and the
Yeah, it's kind of the like you watch it the first time around, it's just for the entertainment value of watching it in just terms of like, I have all these questions. Let's see if the episode answers my questions.
Right.
Then when you watch it a second time, you see all the little hints, the things, the Easter eggs that are dropped that you're like, oh, I didn't pick up on that. Or as you watch later on, and if we go back and we watch it, then we're like, I see there's the foreshadowing of this, there's a foreshadowing of that I wasn't quite aware of in that moment.
Yeah,
sure. No, definitely. There's all these little subtleties. But that's what makes doing the show so fun, is because we can go back and dig into all of them. So I feel like that's pretty much a good place to stop. Is there anything else that you guys wanted to cover about this week?
I mean, no, I mean, it's just, it's like I said, I feel a very big, like, building here for me, you know, especially with Leanne. It's like, who is this chick? What the hell is she capable of? So
yeah. I do want to stay out of her way. That is for sure. As much as I love watching her, I don't want to mess with her.
Just don't be mean, and, you know, just come in real quietly and say, oh, the baby's so cute. Okay, I'm leaving now.
Yeah, be scared of her celebration dance.
Yeah. If the Leanne's dancing, watch out.
Walk to the window and watch her. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, Rick, you want to tell people where they can find your work online?
Sure. I'm Rick Hong. You can find me on all social media at Rick Hong, and HollywoodFirstLook.com. And coming soon is my interviews with some of the cast of All of Us Are Dead, which has been trending like number 1, 2, and 3 on Netflix. Korean zombie high school drama. So
good.
It's good. Coming. I got to talk to him. It was fun. I finished it.
Excellent. And how about for you, Kit?
Hi, I'm Kit Bowen. I'm at the Movie Kit on Twitter. Also, I'm starting a new TikTok channel as well. I'm going to do some short reviews on TikTok, so you can follow me on that. I'm an editor for ScreenPicks.com. And as I said last week, I'm going to be dusting off my website, themoviekit.com, as well.
Excellent. And I am Heather Wixson. You can find me on Twitter over at The Horror Chick. My writing's over at dailydead.com and sometimes fangoria.com. And I have a really fun announcement that's coming next week, which I'm really stoked about. So I'm very, very thrilled about that. But yeah, I thank you guys so much for doing this. It's always a pleasure. And I'm really excited to see where the hell all of this is going. Cause it's like every time I think I've got it narrowed down. I'm like, oh wait, no, nope. I was wrong. I was totally wrong. So that's the fun of
I think I'll see you guys in a couple more times over. So I'll see you next time then.
Yeah, absolutely. But thank you guys so much for watching. Again, leave some comments for us. Let us know what your theories are. This was really fun. I love that we have fans that are interacting with us as well. I think that's really cool. And we really do appreciate you guys tuning in. And we will see you again next week as we dive into episode 5.
Thank you.